They are going to cuff you guys! Oh my god! Fuck! Yes, they actually did hit the plane! Unfortunately, that's terrible.
Fuck. It's a total disaster. It's burning so bad, shit, God forbid, the glow is like after a nuclear explosion.
In recent days, Ukraine has delivered one of the most devastating strikes on Russian military infrastructure since the start of the war. Well, both of them.
But it's coming in.
It hit the building. Damn, I didn't even see the video.
Near Novorossiysk, a large landing ship of Project 1171, the Soviet Tapir, one of only 3 left in existence, was blown up.
Damn, it's roaring, guys.
In Taganrog, a unique flying laser aircraft, the A-60, one of only 2 in existence, was destroyed, and, most likely, a Tu-95 MS strategic bomber was also damaged.
Yeah, the plane got hit. Damn! Arbor. Shit!
Yeah, cool. What even is that? I don't get it.
Shiskari, Stupase, S-400 air defense sites, the Beriev aircraft plant, drone factories, oil refineries, and military units were all hit. Explosions all night and day from Kerch to Sochi. Russia can't handle the pressure. Let's discuss the strikes on Russia's strategic targets with well-known military analyst Roman Svetan.
We've been given permission to strike Russian territory with ballistic cluster and long-range missiles. Well, that's it. All restrictions on targeting the Russian economy have been lifted.
It's a total mess over there. It's burning so badly, damn, God forbid the glow is like after a nuclear explosion.
And now Europe is about to join us, supplying a significant number of long-range strike systems to destroy that economy.
Oh no, these terrible communication networks are really completely falling apart and disintegrating.
Are you stupid or what? What will this lead to? To the dissolution of the Russian Federation. That's truly the only plan being carried out. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Looks like they've occupied Rubliovka. Rubliovka has occupied Moscow, and Moscow has occupied the rest of Russia. The metropolis needs to be shut down because all the other Russian republics, you could say Moscow's slaves or Moscow's colonies as the metropolis, they'll just applaud if we take it out.
Something hit near the air defense globe.
It just struck somewhere over there. There's the missile.
Insane.
That's why we need to focus on this. The main plan, if we're talking about a peaceful one, a peaceful plan for Europe, for Ukraine, is the dissolution of the Russian Federation. One point of a peace plan is the dissolution of the Russian Federation. So let's focus on that. It's easy to work on this by destroying the Russian economy. That's exactly what our defense forces are doing now with the support of our partners. Because now our partners, even the Americans, have allowed us to strike Russian territory with ballistic cluster and long-range missiles. So that's it. All restrictions on targeting the Russian economy have been lifted. And now Europe will join in, providing a significant number of long-range strike systems to destroy that economy. What will this lead to? To the dissolution of the Russian Federation.
They fucked up the substation, damn it.
They're still coming in.
Another explosion. Another one just hit. It's firing.
Already once.
Oh, it's about to blow up, right?
There goes the black smoke.
What's up with you?
I hear shelling.
But what is that?
What is it?
Leonid Ilyich. Huh?
Leonid Ilyich is trying to get rid of you.
Yeah.
There, it's flying, it's flying. What's that? Something went boom, boom.
That's it. Just like that. Just like that, for nothing this time.
Already in another place.
Deep State reports that the Russian army has made significant advances in Pokrovsk, as well as progress near Vladimirovka, which is north of Mirnograd, and in Stepnogorsk, which is in the Zaporizhzhia direction. At the same time, in the Kupiansk area, which Russia claims to have captured, no advance has been recorded. Roman Igorovich, let's start from the beginning. Pokrovsk direction, please. The floor is yours.
This is our main problem right now, which we also need to fight against. What I mean is the lack of troop density on the southeastern front. In order to increase density, especially with motivated and qualified personnel, two tasks need to be accomplished. The first is to bring officers from the strategic reserve into government, and we've already discussed this, bring them into the executive branch so they can give the order to form up all the security forces. That is, all security personnel. In other words, the armed forces of Ukraine will definitely be deployed on a rotational basis. About 30% of the entire law enforcement and civil service system of Ukraine, 30% will go to the military, and the remaining 2/3 will prepare to join the military every 6 months. So this process needs to be set in motion, and that's when we'll end up with roughly 4 groups. So for a third of law enforcement civil servants and a quarter, or rather already a general group, this is the composition of the armed forces of Ukraine, who will go to the front every 6 months to carry out the combat mission of preserving sovereignty and restoring the territorial integrity of our state. This could set this cycle in motion. Only military personnel who understand how to do this, who have been trained in academies, how to do this as part of the executive branch, carrying out certain government administration tasks under the pressure of an external enemy. So this mechanism exists. And what needs to be done, I've already explained 1 billion times, step by step. But once again, only officers, people with basic military education can do this. Right now in Pokrovsk, because there still isn't enough, the density is still insufficient. Russia is trying to push us out of the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration completely, including pushing us off the high ground. This is very dangerous for us. Why? Because if we give up the heights of Pokrovsk, Pokrovsk is currently a gray zone, and Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, you could say, are gray zones under dual control, mainly by long-range strike systems. There are some small tactical groups that are infiltrating the urban area from both sides in what's called a patchwork zone. But as for Pokrovsk and Mirnograd themselves as a defensive line, we are holding them. The Russians are trying to push us out, but we are holding it, especially the heights. For example, the citadel in Pokrovsk, the situation there is quite good for holding the line. The same goes for Krasnoarmyska Western, that's the Pokrovsk mine administration, Western Pokrovsk, those are also heights we are holding. Certain operations are currently being carried out from Dobropilia to push the Russians out. Further actions are aimed at cutting off the northern claw. So there is positive momentum there, at least from the perspective of our operational tactical actions. In other words, the situation is more or less stabilized, at least for now. But in order to fully reinforce the troops there, it is necessary to do so with law enforcement agencies, security structures, or at least with servicemen from these security forces. The issue will be resolved regarding Pokrovsk. That is, Pokrovsk right now, I would say, is not even exactly a pressure point if you consider other directions as well.
Roman Igorovich, while everyone is discussing Trump's peace plan, Putin continues to play war games. The Kremlin's geostrategist has decided to show that he is not at all interested in any ways to stop the war. Once again, Putin dressed up in camouflage and staged a visit to one of the command posts of the West Group. Moreover, the posters on the walls of this command post turned out to be cobbled together from computer game screenshots, as journalists discovered. In these decorations reminiscent of a provincial community center, the war criminal once again, like a parrot, declares that the goals of the special military operation must be achieved. Quote, and in response, Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov solemnly boasts that the Russian army has supposedly captured Kupiansk. This is categorically denied by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of all Ukraine and even by pro-Z Russian bloggers. Roman Igorovich, let's discuss this. So what is the situation in Kupiansk? This is very important.
This is an information psychological special operation involving the top officials of the state. What are they trying to show? Full Russian control over Kupiansk would cut off the main logistical chain leading to the left bank, to our Kupiansk-Uzlovoy garrison. We have a fairly strong group there. The Russians are unable to break through it. They are trying to destroy Kupiansk-Uzlovoy, much like they recently destroyed Kupiansk itself with airstrikes. But by completely destroying Kupiansk-Uzlovoy, they lose it as a future station. So what is Kupiansk-Uzlovoy? It's south of Kupiansk on the left bank of the Oskol River. It's a major sorting station from which several railway lines branch out to the Luhansk, Donetsk, and Kharkiv regions. Trains also come in from Valoiki, another military hub. That's why they want to capture Kupiansk Uzlovoy, preferably not too damaged, or ideally not damaged at all. Because right now, they've completely destroyed both Kabi and Kupiansk. But for now, they're sparing Kupiansk Uzlovoy. However, in order to force our troops to withdraw from the left bank on their own, they're conducting a serious information psychological operation, which Gerasimov and Putin are actively spreading, claiming that they've taken all of Kupiansk and that our garrison on the left bank has ended up in some sort of semi-encirclement pressed up against the Oskol River. Actually, it's the Russians who have a problem there, not us. Why? Because the best positions are occupied there, really good positions. After all, that's the floodplain of the left bank and the Oskol. There are very few tank-accessible routes there. Almost everything is mined, and quite good fortifications are covering Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. The Russians have already broken so many teeth there, it's impossible to count. Our general staff reports that every day more than 1,000 Russians are lost along the entire front line. That's why it's so important for them to create panic on the left bank. And now they are trying to create this panic through an information psychological special operation, claiming that the main logistics chain through Kupiansk has been cut. It hasn't been cut. Kupiansk's logistics are still being held, especially since there's still a lot. After all, the Oskil River is there now, and they've released water from the slippery water protection facility. Basically, it's not a problem to cross it there, so as a water barrier, it poses absolutely no issue right now, specifically there at the Kupiansk junction. And Kupiansk is under the control of the Ukrainian army, at least from the perspective of FPV drones. That is, some of our units have already taken quite good positions there. Units from the unmanned systems forces, and they report that they control the situation to a considerable depth, 15 to 20 kilometers, and sometimes they even fly further and strike, meaning they can reach up to 50 kilometers and are able to carry out these tasks. That's why the Russians have a problem there, and they can't do anything about it. Now they're making things up together with Putin and Gerasimov, telling fairy tales about some kind of encirclement in this direction. But it's actually them who are encircled. We don't have any encirclements anywhere at all. Well, you would be glowing with joy if we did. Right now, we're unraveling them. We're taking them apart near Dobropilya, finishing off the pockets of these encirclements, the fire traps that the Russian army got caught in when they made a move on Dobropilya. In fact, they've already removed the commander of the army that rushed toward Dobropilya. The most interesting thing is they pinned all the blame, so to speak, the dead dogs on him, even though it was Putin who gave the order for this military fiasco. That's why the military hate politicians.
Roman Nikolaevich, what's the situation in the Huliaipole direction? The Southern Defense Forces report that the situation in the Huliaipole direction is quite tense, but the armed forces of Ukraine are not encircled by the Russians. Communication with the Ukrainian military is maintained, logistics are well organized, and the evacuation of the wounded is underway. What is the situation there? This is also a very important section of the front because we see that in the Zaporizhzhia region, Russia is trying to attack. And unfortunately, a number of settlements have been occupied over the past month. The floor is yours.
There is no encirclement anywhere along the entire front, because these stories about encirclement are just that, fairy tales to be left for Gerasimov to tell together with Putin. But it is precisely in the Guliaipole direction where the situation is the most difficult. It's not even as tough in Pokrovsk or in the same Kupiansk. It's specifically in the Guliaipole direction. Why is it so difficult? We had to withdraw, again, because of the insufficient density of troops in this direction. We've said it a billion times. Put the security forces into action, reinforce the Eastern Front with a sufficient number of motivated, competent fighters. Right now, only the security forces can do it. There are no other options. We have 500,000 of them. And just in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, there are 300,000. There is definitely the capability to put 100,000 into action and reinforce the Southeastern Front. Until that's done, we'll just keep retreating. That's what it is. Why isn't there an encirclement? We're pulling back. As soon as there's a serious risk of encirclement, operational level commanders make the decision to withdraw. That's basically why the Russians are advancing rather quickly, though it's debatable, especially in the Guliaipole area. But it's not Guliaipole itself, it's the Zaporizhzhia direction. They've reached the bypass road and are trying to get to the Donetsk-Zaporizhzhia road near Pokrovsk, which is north of Huliaipole. For some reason, they've started a sort of semi-encirclement of Huliaipol itself. But the situation is extremely difficult. We can't afford to abandon Huliaipol. If we leave Huliaipol, the Russians could essentially collapse the front, get into the rear, including in Orikhiv, and we'd have to withdraw from there, and they'd approach Zaporizhzhia. They would pound Zaporizhzhia with army artillery. We absolutely cannot allow that. Right now, Huliaipol is like the keystone of the front, and it absolutely must be held. So we'll see how our general staff handles this situation, because additional forces and resources need to be urgently redirected there. And to solve the strategic problem, we need to bring law enforcement forces into action.
In the US, it is expected that Zelensky will sign the peace plan agreement with Vitkov and Kirill Dmitriev by Thanksgiving, November 27th. After that, the agreement will be presented in Moscow, and the process is expected to be completed by the beginning of December, according to the Financial Times. Elections may be held 100 days after the peace treaty is signed and a ceasefire is established. Right now, Zelensky is preparing a plan to get out of the crisis and understands that quick decisions are needed. Let's discuss the peace talks, the Vitkov and Kirill Dmitriev plan, the corruption scandal involving the well-known military analyst Roman and Svetlana Roman. Welcome to all of you.
Hello, I wish you good health.
Roman Hus, what do you think about the peace plan from Vitkov, Kirill Dmitriev, and Trump regarding Ukraine and the deadline that Trump has set for Zelensky?
The whole issue is about timing. When all these plans, yet another 649th plan will come up. How many of these plans have we already discussed with you? These are plans mostly generated by people who are far removed from the actual problems. This current plan, the one everyone is running around with now, just appeared out of nowhere. They're just trying to use it to drown out the others. All the participants in the process, Alibaba and the 40 Zuckerbergs, those Israeli bandits, their asses are really on fire right now. Why? Because after electricity, that is after nuclear energy, the next big corruption is in the Ministry of Defense. And there's corruption there, plus add a few more zeros to what they stole in Energoatom. Everyone understands this perfectly well, which is why most of the participants in the process have Israeli passports in their pockets. Well, we all know about these Kushners. Vitkov, Mindich, Tsulukerman, and so on and so forth, and those who are still left in Ukraine within the government or who have been close to power, they need to divert this serious problem related to corruption. Let me repeat once again, the next step is corruption in the Ministry of Defense. And it's not just Ukrainian money. Money from the US and Europe has also flowed into the Ministry of Defense. Both the G7 and G20, everyone understands perfectly well that the money was not theirs, of course, so it was under a certain level of control. In order to counteract this extremely negative information, they pulled out from deep down in the basement. I'll put it mildly, not in military terms, because in military terms I'd say it differently. They pulled out these several dozen points that absolutely do not fit together. There's no point in going through all 28 points if the very first one is about Ukraine's sovereignty, confirming Ukraine's sovereignty. The remaining 27 points contradict Ukraine's sovereignty. That's all there is to it. In other words, it's just some jumbled nonsense that they're now letting the participants in the process fight over. It's like, remember, back in the day, Don Quixote from Sancho Panza? Take a wild guess. Who's Don Quixote there and who's Sancho Panza? They fought against windmills. Basically, they made up their own wind. That is a dragon, a windmill as a dragon, and fought against it. And they wanted to drag everyone in to show what great dragon slayers they are. They defeated the windmill. So why is all this being shown? So that later they can grab Dulcinea del Toboso by her private parts and really enjoy it. I mean, what else is it for? So it's the same story here. They're trying to cover up Mingichgay, a very serious Ukrainian problem, extremely serious. External control, Israeli citizens who are running Ukraine, or at least trying to manage financial flows and some decision-making. This is external governance. This is a loss of sovereignty. This is a complete lack of work by our intelligence services. The main intelligence directorate, the security service, the foreign intelligence service, the State Bureau of Investigation, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, and all the rest, they've spawned a whole mountain of these agencies, but there's no real benefit. They overlooked the activities of Minich, a citizen from that Israeli cesspool who was specifically siphoning money from every Ukrainian. What an interesting scheme it was. Mengichi and those 40 thieves, together with Alibaba and, of course, the Israelis, reached into every Ukrainian's pocket. First, he raised the price of electricity. We ended up paying double or even triple the price for this electricity compared to the cost of nuclear power generation. In other words, we paid 3 to 4 times the price for various items, and industry was paying as much as 10 cents. And they reached into every Ukrainian's pocket, stole that money, and ran off to Israel with it. To put it bluntly, they didn't bring the loot to Netanyahu, but to a stash. Well, that's how it looks now. Naturally, all this Israeli riffraff is now trying to somehow cover up the whole thing, telling fairy tales about how someone is supposedly going to betray us and force us, say, into capitulation, fighting against, once again, tilting at windmills, once again, Sancho Panza and Don Quixote, something like that. How should Ukraine approach this? Understanding where the roots of the problem are, we must definitely clamp down on these corrupt officials, force our anti-corruption agencies to clean out everyone and everything. Make counterintelligence start working. There are still those 40 Zuckermans left in Ukraine, and Alibaba stayed, and those 40 Zuckerman bandits stayed too. They need to be pulled out. They need to be arrested. They need to be deported if it comes to that, when it becomes clear that there is direct external Israeli control here, at the very least. And then comes the attempt by this whole rabble to push us toward capitulation. Capitulation through some contrived plan. I've already talked about it. That is absolutely inappropriate. The points of this plan contradict each other. First, we support Ukraine's sovereignty and then give up Crimea, Donbas, and Russia. Something like that. And let's lift the sanctions from it. Where did this even come from? This is the main basis of these so-called points. These are the Istanbul agreements that a couple of well-known Israelis brought to us in 2022 in Istanbul. Who? Abramovich and Bennett, the Prime Minister of Israel. So this sweet pair was pushing exactly these same points. Crimea and Donbass were given to Russia, forgotten, and so on and so forth. And Donbass in its entirety, just like now, it's the same situation. The Russians also drew in land corridors, meaning they tacked them on here, most likely handed over a few more $1 billion to someone, so they just tacked it on, as they say. That's exactly how we should treat this. At this point, we shouldn't pay any attention to this topic at all. We need to go back and bring to the surface the issues related to corruption among these 40 bandits led by Alibaba, and then continue working on this issue. That is to put pressure on them to squeeze them out, and to squeeze them out of the executive branch, and together with the executive branch, more than once already. The thing is, Mindich Gate is, so to speak, one of those so-called signals for us. How many times have we talked about the need to completely restart the executive branch, including at least those 40 bandits, this entire chancellery, and of course the cabinet of ministers. All those Shmihal people should have been sent to the front a long time ago. And the cabinet of ministers, the executive branch, should be filled with military personnel. Why do I say military personnel? Few people know this, and the politicians who jump straight from the stage into positions of power have no idea about it at all. They have no clue about management in the armed forces. There is such a concept as OSR, Officer of the Strategic Reserve of the Cabinet of Ministers. After graduating from the General Staff Academy, every officer who completes the program, since they all undergo training in state governance during hostilities, during wartime, they receive special training, colonels, generals, and that's why they are classified as OSR, Officers of the Strategic Reserve of the Cabinet of Ministers, who are supposed to be brought into the executive branch immediately after the start of an external invasion, or maybe even before that. So what needs to be done is to remove the current executive branch, get rid of the civilians, and bring in the OSR, the Officers of the Strategic Reserve. We have thousands of them, thousands of officers of the Strategic Reserve who have been trained in state governance under difficult conditions. They know how to govern the state. Not these weirdos, all this Israeli riffraff, these green oddballs, but specifically colonels and generals who know how to steer the situation right now. This is what needs to be done now. Right now, there are good initiatives in the Verkhovna Rada to express no confidence in the cabinet of ministers, dismiss them, and within 24 hours bring the strategic reserve officers into the cabinet of ministers and the executive branch, including the chancellery itself. Because Alibaba and his 40 Zuckerbergs or Mindiches have absolutely no business being there, because this is the Ukrainian state. In the end, people with Israeli passports should not be sitting there.
Roman Nikolaevich, what are they writing about this peace plan at Itkovsk? There is a department, and already all the reputable Western media have written about the territorial issues. Ukraine must withdraw its troops from part of the Donetsk region that it currently controls. This territory will become a neutral, demilitarized buffer zone, internationally recognized as Russian territory, but there will be no Russian troops stationed there. Next, Crimea, as well as the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, will be de facto recognized as Russian, including by the United States. Next, in the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions, the front line will be frozen. Russia will relinquish the territories it controls outside of these 5 regions. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will be put into operation under IAEA supervision. Electricity will be supplied equally 50-50 to Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine and Russia will commit not to change the agreements by force. Russia will legally enshrine a policy of non-aggression towards Ukraine and Europe. Let's discuss these details of the Witkoff plan, as I understand it. Of the Kremlin and Kirill Dmitriev.
Let's look at these plans again from above, from the side, and from the perspective of the Criminal Code of Ukraine. The thing is, analyzing these plans, providing informational support, or making appeals of any kind, all of this falls under Article 110 of the Criminal Code of the Republic of Ukraine. There is a very serious article like that. These are calls for the loss of our sovereignty and territorial integrity, appeals. But actions, if God forbid any official signs something or makes any progress on this case at all, that falls under Article 111 of the Criminal Code, that's already considered high treason. And there, especially under Part 3, the penalty can be full confiscation of property up to life imprisonment. So there's no point in even discussing all this. I'll go further. It's not just about discussing it. This is dangerous from the standpoint of prosecution under Ukrainian constitutional law and the Ukrainian Criminal Code. Let's not even discuss all this nonsense at all, because it directly involves the loss of sovereignty, defense capability, and territorial integrity of our state. Article 110 covers this, and actions fall under Article 111. Just so you know, and journalists should be informed about this as well. In other words, there's no need to inject this discussion and agitation into the information space. No one is going to go for that. And those who will, they know where to go. Suitcase train station Sahal or suitcase train station Russia. Yanukovych was raising the very same issues back in 2014. Where is Yanukovych now? Breaking bread in Barvikha near Moscow. These ones will be breaking bread too with those who... They ran away. Mingich showed this perfectly, somewhere near the Western Wall. Well, where else would they run with Israeli passports? So there's no point in discussing all this. None of it is going to happen. It's pure fantasy. And talking just to cover up the real corruption within our government, there's no point, because after all, we're not working for corruption. On the contrary, we should be rooting out corruption with a red-hot iron, especially during hostilities, during wartime. Corrupt officials should either be put up against the wall. Of course, that would require introducing the death penalty for corruption and equating it with looting, because that's exactly what it is, pure looting. Who is Minik? He's a looter, a blatant looter. And all those 40 Zuckerbergs along with Alibaba, they're looters too, who during wartime are just shamelessly stealing the money our partners give us, the money meant to help us fight against the Russians, to restore our sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's why looters should either be put up against the wall, or if they have Ukrainian passports, let's say some of them do, then they should be sent to a penal battalion. Everyone involved in all these processes to the penal battalion. Demote them, if there are any officers among them, by the way, from counterintelligence or intelligence who for some reason have not fulfilled their main duty. They failed to prevent external control over our state, so they should be demoted to privates. Since we don't have execution statutes, demote them to privates, send them to the penal battalion and put them on the front lines, say in Huliaipol or, for example, in Pokrovsk. Let them wash away their guilt with blood. How else? Otherwise, it would be execution. But for now, that mechanism hasn't been put in place. So once again, there's no point in even discussing it. All the points of this so-called Trump capitulation plan, except for the first one, the first point is maintaining sovereignty. But even that one, there's no point in discussing since it's already enshrined in our constitution. We don't need to confirm our sovereignty, nor does anyone else need to confirm it for us. Why? It's enshrined in our constitution. It's affirmed by the Charter of the United Nations, which includes almost 200 countries. Why confirm it? It's already confirmed by default. That's why this whole plan is simply, I'll say it again, it's that dragon, that windmill we're being made to fight now. Right now, we're being forced to fight by all these Sancho Panzas, all these Don Quixotes, all these Alibabas, and all these 40 thieves of Medici. Well, that's more or less how I see it all.
Friends, please like this video and write a few kind words in support of Ukraine in the comments. Roman Labushi and I always discuss current military and political topics. It's been a tough week, and it's very important that we speak honestly about the situation both at the front and in politics. The well-known military analyst Roman Svetlan. Roman Lvovich, thank you, and as always, see you next time.
Goodbye.